1. When did boredom appear? There is no exact year, BC or otherwise, when boredom appeared, but we can approximate. Basic forms of boredom likely existed as soon as modern humans, Homo sapiens, developed. Self-awareness, the ability to imagine alternatives, a sense of time that places it roughly 100,000, 200,000 years ago. Important nuance. What we call modern boredom, existential nothing satisfies me, is much newer. It became clearly recognizable during the Industrial Revolution, 1700s, 1800s. Why? Repetitive work, more free time, less survival pressure, more self-reflection. 2. Why did boredom appear? Boredom is not a bug. It's a biological signal. It evolved to tell you what you're doing is not meaningful, rewarding, or useful enough. Evolutionary function. Boredom pushed humans to explore new environments, innovate, seek better resources, avoid wasting time on low-value activities. Without boredom, no curiosity, no progress, no creativity. 3. How does boredom work? Mechanism. It's tied to your brain's reward system. Dopamine, motivation, interest. When stimulation is too low, boredom, too repetitive, boredom, meaningless, boredom. So boredom appears when you can do something else, but nothing feels worth doing. That's a very human problem. 4. Will boredom ever disappear? Almost certainly no. Unless humans stop having consciousness, or we fundamentally change brain chemistry. In fact, modern life is making boredom more frequent, but also more intense in contrast with stimulation. Why? Constant dopamine, phones, apps, etc. Reduced tolerance for stillness. 5. Do other animals get bored? Yes, but not like humans. Many animals show boredom-like behavior, especially intelligent ones. Primates, dogs, dolphins, parrots. Signs of boredom in animals. Repetitive behavior, pacing, chewing, over-grooming, lack of engagement, seeking stimulation. Example, a dog left alone all day. Chews furniture, becomes restless. That's boredom. Key difference. Animals feel situational boredom. Humans feel existential boredom. Humans can think, what is the point of anything? Animals generally don't. Final idea. Boredom appeared when intelligence met choice, plus time awareness. It exists because it pushes you toward better use of your life. It won't disappear because it's part of what makes humans adaptive and creative.
Boredom as a feeling is ancient, likely as old as complex human or hominin consciousness, but pinpointing an exact appearance here is impossible because it's a subjective emotional state, not an invention. No precise BC date exists like for a tool or law. The word boredom is modern first. In English, approximately 1829, popularized in Dickens' Bleak House, 1852. The experience, however, shows up in the earliest surviving literature. The oldest clear written reference comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh Standard Akkadian version, compiled approximately 2100 to 1200 BC, with Sumerian roots even earlier, around 2000 BC. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, is explicitly tormented by idleness and boredom. He oppresses his people out of restlessness, and the gods create Enkidu as a companion to give him purpose and adventure. This is the first documented case of someone bored enough to seek meaning through epic quests. Earlier speculative claims, for example, Lascaux cave paintings approximately 15,000–17,000 BC, as boredom, art, or doodles are not supported by mainstream archaeology or anthropology. They're usually interpreted as ritual, hunting magic, or shamanic, not idle pastime. Philosophers later mythologized it further. Kierkegaard, God was bored before creation. Nietzsche, on the seventh day. Pascal, after Eden, as longing for God. But these are not historical. Why did it appear? Boredom is an evolutionary adaptation. It evolved as a motivational signal. When your environment or activity becomes too repetitive, safe, or understimulating, boredom creates an unpleasant push to seek novelty, exploration, learning, or change. This prevented stagnation and promoted survival advantages, finding new food sources, territories, mates, tools, or ideas. Without it, satisfied creatures would never innovate or adapt. It drives creativity and cultural progress, as one scholar put it. The human capacity for being bored lies at the root of man's cultural advance. In safe, resource-rich settings, post-hunter-gatherer, agriculture, settled life, or modern comfort, it becomes more noticeable, hence its rise in ancient texts. Once kings or monks had too much leisure. How did it appear? Through natural selection, on brains capable of complex attention and arousal regulation. Brains seek an optimal level of stimulation. Boredom is the aversive alarm when arousal drops too low, similar to hunger or thirst. Neurological mechanisms, dopamine pathways, attention networks detect monotony and trigger restlessness or daydreaming. It likely emerged gradually in vertebrates with flexible behavior, becoming pronounced in intelligent social species like humans. Ancient Romans called it tedium, weariness of life, or place. Early Christians turned chronic forms into the sin of acedia, sloth-like listlessness in monks. When will it disappear? It won't. Boredom is hardwired into the biology of motivation and adaptability. It's not a bug, but a feature. Even in a futuristic utopia with perfect VR, AI stimulation, or post-scarcity leisure, understimulation in some contexts would still trigger it, or we'd evolve new variants. Philosophers like Schopenhauer saw life as swinging between suffering and boredom. Evolutionary biologists see it as essential for behavioral flexibility. It may be managed better via enrichment, novelty-seeking tech. But total disappearance would require removing our drive to explore and improve, which would halt progress. Do other animals get bored? Yes, scientifically demonstrated in many studies show animals in monotonous or barren environments exhibit classic boredom signs, seeking any stimulation. Even aversive, for example, caged mink approach frightening objects faster and longer, eat more treats despite fullness. Lethargy, idleness, mixed with restlessness, stereotypical repetitive behaviors, pacing, etc., as coping, altered time perception, and reduced engagement. Key evidence: Mink and Rat Experiments 2017 review in Animal Behavior, Captive Zoo Animals, Pigs, even some farm domestic species. It's biologically plausible and adaptive, motivates exploration, learning in generalist species. Not all animals, probably not insects or very simple ones, but mammals with complex brains definitely experience boredom-like states. Captive welfare science now treats it seriously to improve enrichment. In short, boredom has been with us and many animals for millennia as a helpful nudge to do more interesting things. It probably won't ever vanish, and that's a good thing for creativity and survival.
Boredom is not a discovery like fire or the wheel. It is a biological byproduct of a sophisticated brain. To pinpoint its start date, we have to look at the transition from survival mode to surplus mode. 1. When did it appear? Approx 5,000, 10,000 BC. While early hominids were likely too busy staying alive to feel bored, boredom as we recognize it probably emerged during the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, c. 50,000 BC, and solidified with the Agricultural Revolution, c. 10,000 BC. The threshold. It appeared the moment humans gained predictability. When you know where your next meal is coming from and you aren't being chased by a predator, your brain, which is evolved to solve problems, suddenly has no problems to solve. The leisure gap. Archaeological evidence of cave art and bone flutes suggests that by 30,000 BC, humans had enough downtime that they needed to fill it with something other than hunting. 2. Why and how did it appear? Boredom is actually an evolutionary alarm clock. It didn't appear by accident, it serves a biological function. The drive for novelty. Our brains reward us with dopamine when we learn something new. This kept our ancestors exploring and expanding. Boredom is the pain we feel when dopamine drops. The cognitive mismatch. Boredom occurs when your arousal level, mental energy, is high, but your environmental stimulation is low. Your brain is all revved up with nowhere to go. The survival mechanism. If an ancestor sat in a cave doing nothing for 3 days, boredom forced them to get up, find a new tool, or improve their shelter. Those who felt bored survived better than those who were content to just wither away in silence. 3. Do other animals get bored? Yes, but mainly the smart ones. Boredom is a luxury of high intelligence. Animals with complex social structures and high cognitive demands are the most susceptible. Great apes. Chimpanzees in captivity show clear signs of lethargy and depression if not given puzzles or social interaction. Canines and cetaceans. Dogs left alone all day will destroy furniture, not out of spite, but to create stimulation. Dolphins and orcas are known to invent games just to pass the time. The goldfish rule. Lower-order animals, like insects or reptiles, likely don't experience boredom because their brains operate almost entirely on immediate sensory input and instinct. If there is no fly to catch, the frog simply waits without existential dread. For when will it disappear? Paradoxically, boredom might disappear not because we become happier, but because we are overstimulated. The digital erasure. In the 21st century, we are killing boredom with micro-interventions. scrolling TikTok, checking notifications. We never allow the boredom alarm to ring long enough for us to actually think. The neural link. Some futurists argue that with Neuralink or direct-to-brain stimulation, we could theoretically keep our dopamine levels at a baseline that prevents the feeling of boredom forever. The cost. If boredom disappears, creativity might go with it. Most great human achievements, from Isaac Newton's calculus to the songs of the Beatles, were born in moments of profound boredom. The wit take. Boredom is the price we pay for not being part of the food chain anymore. If you're bored, congratulations. It means you're at the top of the pyramid and your brain is asking, okay, what's next?
These are fascinating questions that sit at the intersection of philosophy, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology. Let me work through each one. When did boredom appear? There's no single year, but we can triangulate. Boredom as a neurological capacity, the brain's signal that current activity is insufficiently stimulating, almost certainly predates humanity. If we're talking about the feeling, it probably emerged somewhere between 150,000 and 300,000 years ago, alongside the cognitive revolution that gave Homo sapiens self-awareness, forward planning, and the capacity to evaluate the present moment against imagined alternatives. You can only be bored if you can conceive of something more interesting than what you're currently doing. That requires metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Neanderthals may have had a primitive version of this. Homo sapiens almost certainly had the full version. As a named culturally recognized experience, that comes much later. The ancient Greeks had acedia, a kind of spiritual torpor described by philosophers and later by desert monks. The Romans had something similar. But the word boredom itself only appears in English around the 1850s during the Industrial Revolution. Before that, the concept existed, but lacked a precise name in most languages. The 19th century is when boredom became a social problem, something people complained about publicly, wrote about, philosophized about. Because industrialization created for the first time large numbers of people doing repetitive, meaningless work. Or alternatively, wealthy people with too much leisure and not enough purpose. Why and how did it appear? Boredom didn't appear by accident. It evolved because it's useful. The leading neuroscientific theory is that boredom is a motivational signal, an alarm system that tells the brain, current activity is producing insufficient reward or stimulation. Redirect resources towards something more productive. In evolutionary terms, an ancestor who sat contentedly doing nothing for hours was an ancestor who wasn't finding food, building shelter, forming alliances, or reproducing. Boredom is the brain's way of making stillness uncomfortable, of pushing the organism toward action, exploration, novelty-seeking. It likely appeared as a byproduct of three converging evolutionary developments. 1. A large prefrontal cortex, capable of simulating alternatives to the present moment. You can't be bored by what's in front of you unless you can imagine something better. 2. A dopaminergic reward system sensitive to novelty. The brain rewards exploration and punishes stagnation. 3. Self-awareness, the capacity to observe your own mental state and evaluate it as insufficient. Put these three together and boredom is almost inevitable. It's not a bug, it's a feature, one that drove curiosity, exploration, tool-making, art, and eventually civilization itself. Do other animals get bored? Yes, and this is one of the most well-documented phenomena in animal behavior research. Great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, show clear boredom in captivity. Repetitive behaviors, lethargy, irritability, and enthusiastic engagement with novel stimuli that disappears once the stimulus becomes familiar. Zookeepers call this behavioral enrichment management. They actively design environments to prevent boredom. Elephants in captivity display stereotypic behaviors, repetitive swaying, head bobbing, that are widely interpreted as responses to understimulation. Corvids, crows, ravens, jays, are highly intelligent and show clear signs of seeking novelty and stimulation actively. Dogs get bored. Destructive behavior in dogs left alone is largely driven by understimulation. Rats in laboratory settings show measurable preference for novel environments over familiar ones and display behavioral signs of understimulation that closely parallel human boredom. The common thread: the more cognitively complex the animal, the more susceptible to boredom. A jellyfish almost certainly cannot be bored. A chimpanzee almost certainly can. When will boredom disappear? Probably never, but it will transform. As long as humans have a prefrontal cortex capable of imagining alternatives and a dopamine system that rewards novelty, boredom will exist as a neurological possibility. You cannot engineer it away without fundamentally changing what it means to be human. What will change, and is already changing, is how we manage it. The current trajectory is alarming. Smartphones and infinite content have created the most powerful boredom suppression technology in human history. Every moment of stillness can now be immediately filled with a scroll, a video, a notification. We are the first generation that has essentially never had to sit with boredom unless we choose to. The paradox is that suppressing boredom constantly may be more damaging than experiencing it. Boredom is the condition from which creativity, daydreaming, self-reflection, and deep thought emerge. Research consistently shows that people generate more creative ideas after periods of boredom than after periods of entertainment. The discomfort of boredom is, in a sense, the pressure that produces pearls. A future with brain-computer interfaces, fully immersive virtual realities, and AI companions available 24/7 might reduce the experience of boredom to near zero, while simultaneously eliminating the cognitive space where the most interesting human thoughts have always lived. Boredom may not disappear, but our willingness to tolerate it and benefit from it might. And that could be the more consequential loss.